Right, it is 7:01. We can call the order, and our first order of business is the Design Guideline, Lower Village Design Guideline Forum. Um, and I guess, Valerie, who am I turning it over to?
We have Dylan here with Dodson Flinker.
Awesome.
Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having us back again. So we're here to, I guess, share the Lower Village Design Guidelines with the general public. We've met with you several times and reviewed them and revised them and reviewed them and revised them again. But I guess this is the opportunity for the general public who may not have attended previous planning board meetings to be shared, to sort of be brought up to date on where the project is and what is in the design guidelines. So I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, it's not at the beginning of the presentation. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. So our plan for tonight is to do a presentation that's basically, as I said, explaining what is in the design guidelines, and then we'll take questions and try to answer them, and have a discussion if anybody has things they want to discuss about the design guidelines. So the purpose of these design guidelines is several folds. Their first purpose is to inform or educate applicants and board members about what the intent and the vision for the lower village is, to help explain sort of the history of the area, and some of the existing conditions, and to really set forth clarity around the future of design in this area of the town. Some topics in design, when you look at the zoning for the Lower Village Business District, that maybe there's a couple different ways you could design something that would all meet the standards in the zoning. So one of the purposes of the design guidelines is to clarify, when there's multiple approaches, which one it is that the town is aiming towards. Other topics are just inherently subjective. So many topics related to building architecture are inherently subjective. And so you wouldn't want to put too much into zoning, which is supposed to be objective and clear. And so design guidelines provide a venue for the town to direct or steer an applicant for a project towards what they want on topics that are inherently subjective. And then finally, some topics are changing rapidly. So materials may change, technologies may change, design practices are evolving. And so design guidelines offer the opportunity for a town to, again, provide guidance to an applicant related to those topics without having to put that into the zoning, which you might not want to change as frequently as the technologies are changing. So a good example of that is lighting. Sort of approaches and standards for lighting are changing more rapidly than something, say, like parking, which is more fixed. Although also changing. How people think about parking is also changing. Okay, so those are the purpose of the design guideline. I guess I should clarify that these are about the Lower Village Business District. So this was adopted by the town in 2023 into zoning. It's the area along Great Road that's sort of blown up on the right there. Sorry for the quality. This is coming straight out of your zoning map. So the area in blue is what these design guidelines apply to. It's area along Great Road, kind of west of Red Acre Road and east of Faxon Farm, including Faxon Farm, a little east of that. So it includes like the Shaw, I believe it's a Shaw's Plaza there, or maybe a Stop and Shop.
Shaw.
Sorry. Shaw's, okay. The post office, the Dunkin'. So it's, one of Stowe's business districts, and these design guidelines are about future development in that business district. and they're designed to implement and guide the zoning that was adopted in 2023. So I guess I was told before this forum that there may be some people who think this is related to MBTA communities. It's not. This is a different zoning district. This is a business district. And as I said before, the zoning was adopted in 2023. Whoa, okay. So how will the design guidelines be used? So the intent is that they will be adopted into the planning board's rules and regulations. So they sit outside the zoning, but they guide the work of the planning board. The planning board will go through a public hearing process and then adopt them, presumably. And they're to be used during special permit and site plan approval. So what I mean by that is some projects under zoning are by right. You go to the building inspector and you get a permit. Other projects have more detailed review from the planning board. And these design guidelines are primarily for those projects that are more impactful. And so either the project is by right, but the planning board still reviews a site plan. They look at those plans and they can establish basically conditions on the plan, things that they want to change. But this project is by right. And then other projects are special permits. Those are discretionary projects that the planning board can review its criteria and either say whether the project meets the criteria or not, and therefore whether the project is approved or not. So those numbers like 9.3.11 and 9.2.6, those are specific sections in the town zoning bylaw that the design guidelines can be linked to, and the board can sort of make findings related to those based on the design guidelines. So the basic points here are the design guidelines are for projects in the Lower Village Business District that are primarily subject to special permit or site plan review. So the design guidelines document itself is on the town website. I encourage you to check it out. This is basically a table of contents. So it has an introduction. It talks about the historical context. It lays out the vision for the Lower Village, describes some overarching design principles, and then has a page on applicability and use of the guidelines, which is pretty much what I've told you already. And then there are a set of topics of various aspects of design that it provides specific guidelines for. So the vision for the Lower Village, which is included in the guidelines, was developed as part of the adoption of the zoning for the Lower Village Business District. Our firm, Dodson and Flinker, worked with the town on developing that vision. And the image on the left of the screen there shows kind of one possibility for an ultimate redevelopment of the Lower Village. This is just one possibility, but its purpose is to kind of think through how the area could change and then ideally what could happen. So obviously anything that happens on private property in this area will be because a property owner wants to make something happen. And what happens will be based on what they want to do. So they may have a particular business idea and will be designing a site and buildings related to fulfill their business needs. Or maybe they want to put in a mixed use structure. So the design guidelines doesn't tell specifically applicants what they should do, but the vision does lay out sort of what could happen. And from that, we abstract kind of design principles. So the vision shows buildings kind of lining up along the Great Road, creating sort of a sense of consistency and enclosure along the street, with nice sidewalks along Great Road and then linking to the internal parts of sidewalks. It shows open spaces that are intentional and useful. It shows the idea of a new perpendicular kind of main street running into the Shaw's Plaza site, lined by buildings with attractive streetscapes, and so forth. So the intent is that the people use these design guidelines, read the vision, and then try to do what they can to make that vision become reality. The overarching design principles that are laid out in the guidelines document are to define the gateway. So this area is a gateway as you enter into Stowe from the, hold on a second, I'm having my direction dyslexia. As you enter in from the, as you're coming from the east to the west into Stowe, this is one of the gateways to the town, to create a central walkable street. So that's kind of both on Great Road and perpendicular to Great Road, to balance the needs of pedestrians, drivers, and parking. So the idea here is to transform this area over time from one that's primarily auto-oriented, where people drive there, they park at one business, and then they get back in their car and they either leave or they drive to another business. So to transform it from an auto-oriented place into one where people park once and then they can walk around from business to business. To fill gaps between buildings, to plan for connectivity so that each redevelopment project can link to additional redevelopment projects, and the sort of secondary network of pedestrian, bicycle, and street connections and parking connections can be made. To achieve vibrancy through mixed uses, to shape outdoor spaces, to connect to local traditions of building design. So it doesn't mean that every building has to be like historic looking or exactly historic replication, but that there should be some connection between the design of buildings and the strong architectural history of Stowe. And ultimately to build a cohesive center through incremental improvements. Okay, so then getting into the actual structure of design guidelines topics. So each topic, which is an element of design like streetscape or vehicular access and circulation or buildings, has an illustration of the vision for the topic, design principles for the topic, and then guidelines for subtopics, and then precedents for precedent imagery. And I should say here that those illustrations that are throughout the document that look like the one on the left there, they're sort of a watercolory sort of rendering of the ideal future of this area, are all based on the vision plan that I showed you earlier. So what we did is we took the vision plan, we turned it into a 3D model, and then turn those into illustrations. So this graphic is in the design guidelines, and it shows, specifically where each of those renderings is and the intent for that kind of location within the Lower Village Business District. And the illustrations are also intended to kind of show how everything fits together. So in this example, how storefronts and awnings and benches along the fronts of properties relate to sidewalks and street trees, and building design with this porch element or a gable facing the street at a little bump out. So I'm going to walk through some of those topics in the design guidelines. So this one is streetscape. So the sort of guiding principles for streetscape is that streetscape design in the Lower Village should create a network of pedestrian-friendly and interconnected streets that go beyond simply providing vehicular access to become a center of community life where people feel welcome to walk, explore, rest, and socialize. Some of the things that are covered in the streetscape designs guidelines section. So there's what's called a regulating plan, which basically lays out the preferred location for new street or street-like connections. And then has some cross sections for different types of streets or street-like things, like basically they're divided into the Great Road, which has been recently rebuilt and is unlikely to change, primary streets and secondary streets. And so there's a cross section for each of those street types, and there's a table that sets basic parameters for that cross section. Other topics that are covered in the streetscape design section, it goes through the kind of the parts of a sidewalk. So the furnishing utility zone, which is the part near the curb that typically has trees and benches. The pedestrian throughway, which is the part you walk on. And then any space that's left between the sidewalk and the front of the building, which might have outdoor dining or sandwich board signs or planters or some attractive landscaping. They lay out guidelines for travel lanes and bike facilities, sidewalk materials, crosswalks. So there's an illustration that shows the preferred crosswalk striping style for the Lower Village. There's some examples of the preferred general types of street furnishing, not prescribing specific street furnishing, but showing the kinds of things that seem appropriate and so forth. The vehicular access section, this is an image showing that kind of perpendicular Main Street that's envisioned for the plaza. So Great Road is along the bottom of the image, and the perpendicular Main Street. So vehicular access should be oriented to maximize connectivity and reduce the prominence of vehicles in the landscape. This section covers things like driveway configuration and width, the parking lot location, that all parking should either be beside or behind buildings so that it's screened and doesn't dominate the experience and interrupt the walkability of the area. There are guidelines for shared parking, basically encouraging it. Guidelines for parking lot landscaping and stormwater capture, electrical vehicle charging station, loading facilities, etc. All of this is designed to basically ensure that developments are planned to be both suitable for pedestrians and vehicles and bicycles, to link development across lot lines where possible, and to ensure that parking isn't the most dominant experience of the Lower Village. Building design section, the principle overall there is that buildings should be designed to contribute to a cohesive, vibrant village environment. And it goes on to say a bunch more. There are a lot of standards in the building design section. That's because building design is one of those topics that's kind of inherently subjective. And so it's hard to write much into a zoning bylaw, but there's a lot to say in design guidelines. So, for example, the design guidelines talk about how buildings should be broken up into bays, sort of horizontal sections, as well as have a base, a body, and a cap. So a basic idea that if buildings are designed in this way, they become more pleasing, and they also reflect the New England traditions more. It talks about how long sections of buildings should be, preferably, so 20 to 30 feet, preferably. Buildings would be broken up into masses of that length. Talks about roof styles and roof additions, facade detailing and articulation. The list continues for buildings. So entrances, storefront windows, there's guidance about sort of the minimum percentage of glass that should be along a storefront when you have storefronts. Talks about building finish materials and encourages that buildings not have corporate branding, that they be designed uniquely for this location, and so on. The landscaping section, the principles here are that landscaping should reflect the character, history, and ecology of the site and its surrounding area. So the design guidelines talk about how new development should relate to the Lower Village Common if it fronts on that. talks about the space between sidewalks and buildings and the appropriate uses and design of those, so that that space is not kind of wasted, but contributes to the relationship between sidewalks and buildings, links the two, and makes the place welcoming and attractive. It lays out plant species. For example, it says that essentially species should be native wherever possible or naturalized, and adapted to the conditions in which they're going to grow, so that they minimize the need for irrigation or fertilizer or herbicides. There are a number of standards related to street trees and tree planting. So there are minimum soil requirements, minimum tree pit surfaces, and it requires tree pit guards. All of that is to try to ensure that trees are able to live to be mature and full-sized. The sort of main determinant of whether a tree survives is whether it has enough soil area for its roots so that it can access both the air and the water that it needs. And then it talks about parking lot, landscaping, planters, and stormwater infiltration. The lighting section is one of those ones that's a little bit more technical. Overall, it's promoting dark sky lighting. It says that outdoor lighting should create a welcoming village atmosphere by safely illuminating streets, walkways, building entrances, and other important features, while minimizing harmful impacts on adjacent properties, residents, motorists, pedestrians, village ambience, and the night sky. So the design guidelines are intended to work with the lighting standards that are both within the Lower Village section of the zoning and the lighting section of the zoning. So they kind of go above what is required by the zoning with the intent to foster dark skies, appropriate lighting, while at the same time creating a place that is functional for people to move through at night. So these conditions in here of total site lumen limits and backlight, uplight, and glare is basically talking about how much light can be allowed to spill from a light fixture, how the times a day that light fixtures should be turned off, basically a short time after businesses are no longer operating, with the exception of necessary security lighting. That light should be warm colored. There should be a hierarchy of lighting. It sets maximum fixtures of heights, sets color rendering standards, etc. The signage section talks about how signs should enhance the vitality of streetscape through thoughtful design and placement, attracting pedestrians to local businesses while harmonizing the overall appearance of the facade and the streetscape. So this section talks about architectural cohesion, size, materials, colors and logos, illumination, various kinds of signs and guidelines for those. And then shows a bunch of images of precedents that seem like they would be appropriate for the lower village. So that's an overview of what's in the design guidelines and the various topics. And then there are a couple of recommended changes that are in a memo that we've provided a couple of memos to the planning board related to recommended zoning changes to strengthen the link between the design guidelines and the zoning. So one of those is to add a provision to the Lower Village Business District section that empowers the planning board to adopt design guidelines for the Lower Village. It's not 100% necessary, but doing it would strengthen the link. And adding a provision to the purpose statement of the Lower Village Business District that makes implementing the vision and guidelines and a purpose of the Lower Village Business District. So in other words, when the board is making discretionary decisions, they can refer to the purpose statement of the district. And if that purpose statement refers to the design guidelines, it basically ties it all together. Longer term, we recommend that the Lower Village Business District zoning section is revised somewhat to streamline it. and to clarify some of the design standards that are in it. So that is the end of the presentation. And I'm going to stop screen sharing and see if anybody has any sort of clarifying questions before we get into sort of a discussion. So,
Meg?
Yeah, I just had a question. And this, I love this document, so do not get me wrong on this. But
Thank
you
you.
have a picture of on page 52, and it has to do with the landscaping section. And then on page 58 is the same picture, and it has to do with lighting. So I was just kind of curious, did you intend to have that same picture for both things? And it doesn't really illustrate really, I mean, there's more lighting that's beaming down on page 52 than there is on page. I'm curious. This is a curiosity question.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it is intentional. So one of them is about lighting and the other is about signage. And so, yeah, we're trying to show how things look at night with the lighting and how that relates to the signage. So that's the intent there. As well as
Nancy?
there's the practical matter of just producing these illustrations. It's quite time consuming. So that was a
Go ahead, Nancy.
time-saving
Okay.
measure.
I might just have a blank space in my mind. I'm sorry if this is a dumb question. All right. I know we voted on Lower Village design stuff, right? A while ago. We voted at town meeting, right?
Yep.
I don't see anything in here. Maybe I just missed it, but wasn't there a whole part about the specifications of if residential is added into the business district? Like, remember all that? You had to park in the back and the entrance had to be here and the height could only be this.
So that's all in the zoning bylaws. The
Okay.
design guidelines are meant to be a layer on top of that to try to influence the actual design of future development. All of the zoning bylaws that were passed in 2023, I believe,
Yeah.
still hold, and we're absolutely not trying to represent all of the zoning bylaws in the design guidelines. One is meant to supplement the other.
Okay.
Yeah, Lori has it exactly right. The design guidelines are supplementing the zoning and trying to clarify areas where the zoning
Okay.
needs a little extra clarity.
So somewhere maybe we would state that this supplements existing zoning. I don't know. I just think people might think we're starting over or something, you know.
Okay.
But that's just an idea.
Yep. We will check that.
Well, actually, I see that on page 3, it says in support of the Lower Village rezoning in 2022.
Yeah.
It does say 2022 and 2022. So I think it's missing.
Yeah, I noticed that today too.
So yeah, I get that. Okay.
All right. I'm going to go to some of the public who joined us, thankfully. And if you just bear with us, we actually have to individually unmute you. And so, sorry, I saw, and the name on the screen that I saw you had your hand up physically in your video was Paul McClure. So Valerie, if you can unmute. I'm sure this is not Paul, but that's the name on the screen.
Yes, hi. It's actually Pat McClure, and I live on Elm Ridge Road. So I was just wondering, how many businesses do you envision in this lower village?
I wonder if we could just put up the one of the drawings. And again, this is not meant to be any proposal or to say that this is exactly what it's going to be. What Dodson and Flickr did is they did a drawing to show us if people were if developers were to come and build out based on our bylaw and design guidelines, what might that be? And so I guess, Dylan, if you could kind of just talk through
Sure.
a little bit of what's where on this picture, just to give the public that sense.
Yep. Yeah, so over here is, I believe this is the post office. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving. It's a gray building. So everything in this map that's gray is existing and would continue to exist in this hypothetical future. Everything that's brown is proposed to change, or could change, and would change over a long period of time of decades. So, and then the Shaw's Plaza is currently in here. And hopefully that gives you enough. The Lower Village Common is over here. Hopefully that gives you enough orientation. So what it's showing is basically filling in some of the spaces between buildings with new buildings, or connecting and expanding existing buildings along the Great Road. Filling in some of the blank spaces on the other side of the Great Road, and then adding some buildings within the current parking lot of the shopping plaza, while retaining enough parking to serve the new commercial or mixed use space. So I don't have a number for you of how many new businesses there would be. That's a factor of basically what's the balance of mixed use space and purely commercial space, and how big of a floor plate would those commercial uses need. So some businesses don't need a lot of space, and others need a huge amount of space, like a grocery store. So I can't tell you exactly how many new businesses there would be, but maybe it's
And
over the
and
course of
again,
decades. Maybe it's
just want to reiterate,
third.
this is long-term planning. There are no proposals on the table. No, the existing owner hasn't said they want to do any of this. This is a long-term planning of what would our zoning bylaw allow, and what might it look like. And then the design guidelines are trying to help shape what that may look like if and when change does come. All right, I'm going to go to the next person, Mary Mintz. Just give us 1 second to unmute you. Okay.
Okay. Hi. Um, so I think my question, you kind of answered it, Lori, but it still remains a question. This is not, if I'm correct, this is not the first proposal for what a village type concept would look like in the commercial district of Lower Village. I think this looks great. I think you all know that I am a proponent of filling in the spaces and making the town look like what we all want the town to look like, and creating spaces that have viable retail uses and opportunities to meet. So I guess I'm thrilled to be seeing this, and what are our next steps, and what do we do with this information, and where do we go from here to implement some of what we're looking at?
And I guess I'll make a few statements, and then Valerie or Dylan, if anybody wants to add on to that, which is the first step was to adopt the Lower Village Business District zoning bylaws, which we've done in 2023. The second step is to create these design guidelines so that anyone who is interested in doing any development in town knows the vision of the town and what we want. And so we're here today to look at this draft of the design guidelines and get input so that we can help finalize those and make those a part of a reference document material that will be there showing the town's vision. And I guess Valerie or Dylan, I'll if you want to add anything of what comes next, feel free to do so.
Sure, I'll just add that, given that the town doesn't own property within the lower village, we can't look to construct, right? So it's really looking for working with property owners now, working with applicants as they go through the permitting process to use this document to better explain what the zoning says and what the town is looking for in terms of design. But again, because we're not property owners, we can't begin efforts on this directly.
And that's why I said zoning and design guidelines are about long-term planning. And as Dylan mentioned, it will be change that happens over a long period of time. And so the whole point is to have this in place so that when change comes, we are able to influence it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Ed DeLuca.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So one of the things that I also really like the design and the outlook. One of the impediments I think that's kind of outside your purview, but it's got to be discussed within the town, is that any of these sort of cute central business districts like Hudson has, or West Concord or Concord have roads that have speed limits of about 25 miles an hour. And the speed limit on 117 there is 35 miles an hour. And people view speed limits as the minimum speed that they really should be traveling at. So it's a very different situation. And slowing that traffic down, making that, trying to tie one side of 117 to the other in a walkable manner requires really some thought about how you restrict 117. And it's a problem because it's a major thoroughfare for a lot of commuters. The downtown through Hudson isn't, maybe also a major thoroughfare, but I don't think it has the same traffic load as 117 does during rush hour. So I think that's kind of a fundamental stumbling block here with, building the village concept, is that you've got this artery that a lot of people view as my way of getting to Bolton, to Maynard, to down to work, back from work. And it's different. It's a different characteristic, I think, than some of these other areas that we would like to emulate. And I just don't know how it's going to work.
Yeah, so
Valerie, do you have any comment on that one, or Dylan?
Yeah, I could respond to that. Yeah, so that's one of the main reasons for this idea of what would be ideal as a new sort of perpendicular Main Street. It's running perpendicular to the Great Road, which is of course entirely dependent on one property owner, right? But that's the reason for that is because that then gets you off of that major traffic flow, right? So you can still capture that traffic flow for the purpose of generating business, but you can have a street that's slow and relatively quiet and comfortable. In terms of the Great Road itself, I totally agree with you. Traffic moves pretty quickly. It's pretty noisy. But if you can, over time, start to fill in the gaps along the street, plant more street trees, improve the landscaping between the sidewalk and the buildings, you can start to signal that this is an area where it's important for drivers to pay attention. And ideally, hopefully, they'll start to slow down. So there's some evidence that, for example, they talk about the sort of visual friction on the sides of streets. So things like street trees make a difference because they give people a sense of how quickly they're moving, and they will move slower if they're getting that feedback.
And that's right. And if you look at the details of the design guidelines, they reference the primary street and the secondary street, all of which is off of Great Road. And that's why the infill, to kind of make it feel like that village type, is important as well. Anything to add, Valerie?
No, I think that was very well said.
Okay. Mike Jordan. Just give us one more. There we
Okay.
go.
Yeah, hi. So, I have to say I was not a fan of the zoning changes when we implemented them. I voted against them. Um, I don't think they're a good idea, and I really don't like the idea of making them even more prescriptive by putting these on top of them. I'm looking at, the pictures that were shown. I see, happy people in short sleeves, gently strolling through leafy lanes. And I'm thinking about today when, it's cold outside and the overwhelming majority of people just want to drive their car as close as possible to the grocery, run out dressed in their winter coats and boots, run in, get their groceries, get back to their car and get the heck out of there. I just don't get it, frankly. I just don't understand what we're trying to do, and I have no problem with the lower village the way that it is. And I realize that view is not popular, but that's my view.
Thank you for sharing. All right. Let's see. Mark Brozak. One second. There we go.
Hey everyone, Mark Brozak. I'm on Birch Hill Road. I'm also a member of the Stowe Economic Development and Industrial Commission, although we have not discussed this formally, so I'll do my best representation, but nothing I'm going to say is official. So I have a few comments I'll rattle off, and then you can respond to whatever you like.
Okay.
So I guess first is knowing that most of this development would really be for Brasswater or whoever they sell the plaza to in the future, to turn that plaza into something like this. I'm curious if you've had any feedback from them. If they were to sell it to somebody else, would the understanding be that they are expected to develop something in accordance to this? Or is that purely up to them if they should decide to do new development in the future? I'm my concern is sort of the logistics and economics of it. We have a lot of vacancies in the lower village. I think the plan is absolutely beautiful. I think this would be ideal. I think you did a fantastic job with it. But you know, what are the economics of somebody putting more businesses in place when they already have a lot of vacancies that they can't fill? Do any of the places that you looked at for inspiration, were they sort of under patronized areas that then after this revitalization got a lot more business? And if so, it'd be something that I think we probably on the commission would love to use as something to attract businesses. And sorry, I've got one more thing I'll throw in there. The third is, are there any things that the town can do in addition to what these property owners are doing, whether it be putting in some of these attractive street lights, on the edges of the properties, or putting physical archways as you're entering and leaving Stowe Lower Village, or some of the adjacent towns have things like the hometown hero flags that they put up along the way, anything like that makes it more welcoming in ways that the town does control. All right, thanks. I'll shut up.
Aurelie, do you want to start with on that one?
Sure. So I can try to touch on a few of them. I don't know if I remembered all of them, but you can jump in again if we're forgetting anything. So your first question about the economics of it, you are right that it really is dependent on the landowner to choose whether or not they want to develop. So a lot of it is going to depend on the market at the time, the owner's interest, and other factors. So this is to kind of reiterate something that was said before, though. These are guidelines, so they are not intended to be as strict as the zoning bylaw itself. But again, this is communicating the vision. So if someone were to develop, we would look to have them develop in this fashion. Other things that are holding back development include water. So certainly as we continue to think about the feasibility of water in the lower village, that's really the next string, really for looking to incentivize development in lower village. The question about the other kinds of placemaking items, the street lights, the hometown heroes, we do have quite a large right-of-way that we own as the town along 117. So there are some things that the town would be able to look to do. It's definitely something that's interesting to think about, you know, which board would pursue that, what funding mechanism would be able to be used to move forward with it. I think I might have gotten them all. I don't know if there's anything I missed.
I think one thing I'll add is you asked, you know, were we inspired by other places that we've seen successful? I know, you know, the visual is really about small scale retail. It's not meant to compete with the Maynard Plazas of the world because that's not really the space we have. But we definitely looked at places like the West Concord Plaza that has quite a bit of successful retail businesses that have moved in there. So that was something that we discussed along the way. And I believe that development was actually uh, the developer worked with the town of Acton to bring that to life. And so, and certainly West Acton has seen lots of sort of redevelopment over the years as well. So that, I guess, is one example I'll call out. I don't, and feel free anybody else to add your own, but that's one that I remember that we discussed. All right.
Can I respond to the economics question?
Sure.
So I think that one way of looking at this is that, as Lori said, there are lots of places that are better suited for auto-oriented development, auto-oriented commercial development in your surroundings, right? So Maynard, for example. So it may be that you have a lot of vacancies in this area because they can't compete with those areas that have greater traffic volumes and more convenient auto access. So you need a different market. You may need a different market approach. And so the underlying idea here is be competitive by being a more attractive place, right? Where don't try to get the cars, try to get the people and make it a place where people want to go and be, because they can go on the internet and buy anything they want and have it delivered to the doorstep, maybe later that day or the next day, or they can stop off at the giant plaza next to the highway on their way to or from work. So I think that places in this kind of geographic setting that are going to be successful in the future do so because they are attractive places. They're places where you go to see people to get something that you can't get anywhere else. And then just to speak to the what else can you do, I think that signaling that the planning board has a vision and that they're open for business and that they're welcoming of development proposals that, and they'll work with applicants. And then finally, I think activating that Lower Village Common is a great opportunity. So holding more events there, bringing people there, starting to make life happen.
Karen is a member of the planning board, and I'm going to call on her to see if she has a comment on this topic.
Yeah, I just want to backtrack to a comment about water is an issue with redevelopment. And I don't believe that is an issue with the shopping plaza. So that I don't believe that's holding back development. But that being said, it's entirely up to the property owner of whether or not they want to redevelop or do some infill. But I believe they do have the adequate water.
That's
Correct me if
correct.
I'm
Yeah,
wrong,
it's an
Lori.
issue for the full south side
Right,
road. Yeah.
right.
All right, I'm going to go to Mark Forges.
I think Dan has had his hand up for a little bit.
Go ahead. Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. We can go to Dan.
Sure, I don't mean to interrupt you, Mark, but I wanted to understand what is the role of the town in making this happen? You've done a wonderful job envisioning and visualizing and sort of conceptualizing this. But yet you've also said that you haven't had any conversations, for example, with the current owner of the plaza, who would be central to sort of if the owner of that plaza envisions this as a great way to make money and move forward, great. But do you sort of put out this idea and just have it there and wait till people come, or is there a role of the Stowe leadership, the Stowe town, to make it happen?
I think that's an excellent point. Certainly I think that is our responsibility to market the town. I think that it's something that I know Mark's here, so the Economic Development Industrial Commission could help us with. Perhaps the planning board, the select board, other entities could be very helpful with that. That's a great point.
And certainly there are components of the new comprehensive plan that try to draw upon the marketing aspect of the town as well. So I think the town has a role, but again, we certainly can't make developers do anything. All right, I'm going to go to Mark, and then we'll switch back to Bill Roop. Mark?
Hi, Mark Forbes, White Pond Road. Just wanted to point out something that I see in this plan is that it almost looks like when I look at the plan, it looks like all the back of the buildings on both sides of the road are facing the road. And the concept, when I get the idea, the concept is that you drive into this offset road into a parking lot of some kind, and it has all these beautiful buildings in the front, showing what the facade, the front facade of the buildings are, but it's to the back of the building as you drive down 117. When I lived in Miami, they had all those kinds of developments down there. I drive by most of them because I couldn't find them. They were hidden by the back of the buildings and these nice facade of trees and palm trees and everything else that was there. I'm curious that I don't think there's enough room to do this type of development. On the Shaw side, you might be able to do a small development like that, but on the other side of the road, you've got multiple business owners over there, and unless they all buy out each other and make one big piece of property, I don't see this happening. I just don't agree with the concept, and it's because I don't see how people are going to see these things. They're going to see the back of the building, and I like the concept. Don't get me wrong. I think the idea of it is fabulous. Being able to walk into a nice area where you can walk around and do your shopping and everything else. But you're hiding the signs. You're hiding, and you might have a sign out front, but you're hiding the front facade of the buildings. That was one of the things that Linear, when they owned the building, had a meeting with you guys, and that's one of the things that he had said at the time was that he doesn't want to hide his Shaw sign, doesn't want to hide the signs of the other buildings, stores over there. You want people to see them as they're driving down 117. I think you're going to be hiding those signs. And I think that's one of the problems with this concept. Other than that, I think I'm good.
I think I'll make a comment and then I'll ask Dylan to comment on the feasibility aspect of it. So one of the plazas that comes to mind where it has the parking in the back would be the Duck Soup building over in Sudbury. And so it's not that they wouldn't have any facade on the street facing. It's not going to be a blank wall. So I do think there's opportunity to have it look like a store on the backside, facing Great Road, as well as the inner side. But Dylan, I'll ask you to comment on the feasibility aspect of it. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I guess I didn't quite understand the comments. So along Great Road, the idea is that there would be building facades and signs facing Great Road. And so if the businesses there would have the visibility to Great Road, the parking would be accessed through driveways that are visible, noticeable, and access parking in the rear, which provides the opportunity for additional sort of business space if the owner so desires. The perpendicular Main Street, I understand the idea that may, and sort of pad sites along the front may hide the buildings in the back. But it's entirely common for there to be pad sites in the front of very large shopping plazas. So it's
Right, very large. The key word you said was very large shopping plazas. This is not this. You don't have the area to be a large shopping plaza. Even behind Shaw's, they have that road that goes behind it. You got a bunch of homes back there. That certainly couldn't be a perpendicular road in the back. I just don't understand the concept where you're going to be hiding the front of the buildings from Great Road. And the store owners, we have a hard time drawing anybody in. I'll tell you what, Dunkin' Donuts did a fabulous job. I love the looks of the building. I love the front of the building and the facing the road. And you watch the parking lot. It's got people in it all the time. That's because they've done something that was good and right, and they did it in the right way. We haven't had that happen in a long time in Stowe, where someone came in and put that type of effort and money into a building, into a store. And it's because they don't have the draw. You don't have a lot of cars going by, even though it seems like we get a ton of cars going by Great Road. We don't have the volume of cars where people are stopping in. They're commuting to Maynard, to Boston, through the town, back to Bolton, back and forth, all from 495. You don't see a lot of people stopping into Stowe. There's got to be a draw into it. At Dunkin' Donuts right now, the way it looks, people are stopping, and hopefully, I'm hoping that it survives. The other two that were in town did not. I just don't understand the concept of hiding the front of the buildings from the road that you travel on. I went through like the other gentleman was saying about the speed limit over there. I went to the traffic safety committee. I got a petition from the people, asked them to slow the speed limit down, and they said, "Yeah, we can't do that because we're afraid to bring it to the state. The state's going to say, well, all our traffic stuff is faster than 35 miles an hour going through the center of town, and they're just going to say, well, we're going to raise the speed limit rather than lower it." Well, they wouldn't do that in the school zone because of safety. I don't think they would do it in the middle of Stowe, in the lower village either. But they kind of blew me off on that. But I think that this concept it just doesn't feel right to me. And I think that a nice development there like Dunkin' Donuts did would be fabulous. I'm hoping we can do something for it. That's all.
Thanks, Mark. Let's go to Bill Roop, which is under Karen Roop.
Can you unmute? Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. I hadn't really planned to be real involved in this, but it may be helpful to have somebody that hasn't been real involved. I go back over 25 years ago when Karen Keller gave me a call when we were doing something in Lincoln and said we'd like to do some 55 plus housing in Stowe. And I remember very clearly working with the planning board in a creative kind of a way, both in terms of aesthetics and how it would function. And I think from a developer's point of view, which is what I am, that's a key factor. And then the same thing with Faxon, when instead of making another strip shopping area, we reconstructed the 1860 Greek Revival style house in order to improve the streetscape of the lower village. Even though it wasn't a historic requirement, it would have been cheaper and more profitable to tear it down. And then we created a barn where the old barn used to go fell down, and that's a commercial insurance agent. So there's the idea of being creative. And then we purchased one condominium lot from the post office and gym and moved that over. And so the creativity and working with the developer, I think, is a key item. And certainly the planning board, I felt they were very effective at that, of coming up with good ideas. The other reality, there are two big realities that have been touched on very clearly. One is the primary property owner owns the shopping plaza, and I don't know them, I don't know the detail, but in my perception, they're an investment group, and they're looking for ways to make money. Period. They care about trees. They want to be sure the water works and some other things. And it seems like it's big when you look at it, but when you really get into it as a developer, it gets small all of a sudden with parking and buildings and so forth. The ideas that have been presented, I think, are excellent. They provide a great reference, a point of reference for the planning board and for potential developers. The other thing that's huge, and it's been a problem forever, is Route 117. It's a busy route. When you get into Bolton, everybody slows down. They're ready for the police to jump out from behind a bush or something. And but the traffic. So there are two different things going on, as people have pointed out, on each side of the road. I don't think they're related. I don't think you can make it like a main street would be in the, just the train. It just doesn't work. The other thing to watch carefully, which I've enjoyed a little bit, is the Wayland Town Center, where they created a town center from nothing. And there are things that have worked well. There are certainly some big things, Ace Hardware and Stop and Shop and so forth, and restaurants. But a lot of the smaller businesses that you thought might be nice haven't done well. There's a vacancy problem. And so from a town's point of view, it's almost like going back 25 or 30 years and being willing to work with the developer, and so that the developer feels that he can be successful and make some money. And the town will, by being prepared, like you're doing now, are prepared to work on it as to what you want and what makes sense. So I think it's got a lot of good points, but it's really up to the people that own the shopping center as to how that's going to play out. And if you're ready to work with it, certainly at the time, the planning board, when we first met with them, was, and of course we worked on the zoning, we worked on the how to do the rezoning, we worked on the special permit, and so you've got a great group of people to work with. And I think if developers know that, they'll come in with a positive idea and work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Alex Rosowitz. All right, Alex.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm also with EDIC. Mark was on earlier. I just wanted to mention that we have had some conversation with Brasswater. They're the guys that own the shopping plaza, and they actually had presented a rendering of what they had envisioned for, if any of us remember what used to be called Papagino's. They had a rendering of that, which was not dissimilar. I mean, I could share it with you if you want me to, on the screen if you want me to do it now. It's not dissimilar to what we've just been seeing. So Brasswater, the owner and developer, clearly have a vision which is not dissimilar to the vision that has just been laid out. I just wanted to let everyone know that.
It's great to know that you have started a dialogue with them. And maybe if you could send that to Valerie, we can discuss that together and talk about how we can engage. Valerie,
Yes, so I have seen it. So in fact,
you've seen it, Valerie, okay.
Yes, and so we can't really discuss it too much because it will come before the planning board for a special permit at some point. So in my perspective, it is the lessee, the person who is leasing the space, who is looking to remodel. It is, just for the board's awareness, it's not a redevelopment of the building or the site.
My understanding, and we could discuss this offline, of course. My understanding is that this was what Brasswater had proposed as their vision of what that piece at the end would look like. But maybe I'm wrong. So, yeah.
So certainly, based on the comments people are making, yes, I think that both EDIC and Planning Board, I think we're very open to talking with developers, working with them, helping to influence future development and hopefully in a way that is in line with our vision as well. All right. Any other comments from the public or questions? All right. Any other comments or questions from the planning board?
Where is this document going to next reside? Like, is this a final version that will be existing as a link, or do we have an opportunity to kind of go through some of the pages at some point?
I think that if there are comments like such as typos or non-substantive changes, those can certainly just be sent over to me, and I can share those with Dylan. I think we are looking to gather any last comments and finalize the documents. And I know that Dodson Flinker has also provided us with some guidance about a couple of zoning bylaw tweaks we should make and how to better incorporate this into our review process with rules and regulations as well. So once this document is finalized, we'll still have a couple of other items to tidy up.
So certainly we'll be discussing it as the planning board and looking to adopt it eventually.
Okay.
Any last comments to us, Dylan?
Yeah, thanks for having us tonight, and thank you all who provided comments. I hear the different ideas about the economic future of the area and what's possible, and fully recognize there are different visions for the future. What we did is we tried to work within the vision that's laid out in the years and years of planning that the town has done for this area and the various reports that summarize that, as well as what's in the Lower Village Business District. So I think this is the direction that the town, through its planning processes and its adoption at town meeting, has decided it wants to go. And we try to make design guidelines that reflect that, and will advance it. So I encourage you all to continue to patronize this area so that you show that there's a market for businesses in this area, and do whatever you can to move it on to the next steps to be the wonderful village center that it seems like a lot of you want.
All right, Dylan, thanks to you and your team for the work. And I certainly look forward to discussing with the planning board and finalizing. And I thank all of the public that came out tonight to learn about it, but also to offer input. And certainly, if you have additional input, please send that to the planning office as well. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks,
Yeah.
Dylan.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.